Our guest today has some very irrational thoughts, but they're one you should listen to because when it comes to sales, ooh, gosh, it's not a four-letter word. But imagine if you had some skills or some intuition where you actually knew who you were speaking with and the way they communicated and why they communicated that way before you even got into your sales conversation. It's not stalking, it's not ESP, but there's some very interesting things we're going to learn from our guest today on how to really connect with a person so they know, like, and trust you way before you have to ask for the sale. So without further ado, our guest today, Mr. Matt Galpin. Matt, how are you today?
Phenomenal. I appreciate you having me, Doug. And I love that intro.
I love it. Before we do, I want to find out more about the man and mission. Give me some of your background.
Yeah, so I have a very atypical background. I had a horrible childhood growing up. I'm not going to make this a sob story, but I've been on my own since I was about 15 years old. When you're not even legally old enough to work, like, what do you do? For me, my answer came in the form of the classified ads. They said $100 to $300 cash paid daily. That was it. I was like, that's for me. So I showed up and they taught me how to sell frozen steaks out of a freezer on the back of my truck.
Frozen steaks, Cutco knives. Either way it works. Good training. I love it. Yeah.
And I bombed the first 2 weeks. I think I made like $40 total, right? I was pissed. But when I was checking out that night and I had told myself, my sales career's done. Like, I'm going home tonight. We're going to do something else. And the guy who checked out in front of me was a legitimate, like, drug addict, right? And he checked out and made $1,200. I was like, wait a second. He was here 2 or 3 days ago and he made like $1,400. And he was here 2 or 3 days before that and made a little over $1,000. And that's what I told myself, like, if a drug addict can do this, so can I.
Better than the caveman commercials from the Geico, which are better than the lizard, by the way. But yeah, go ahead. That's good.
Yeah. And so I started my sales career selling frozen steaks. I've also sold, Kirby vacuums, cars, homes, businesses, consulting, merchant services, software, enterprise deals. The list goes on. Yeah. And then in addition to that, when I was discharged from the military, I was medically retired and I had received a lot of elite training that I never got to use. They discharged me before I was able to deploy. So I dedicated 10 years of my life to taking the advances from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, translating that to civilian care, where I was the head of clinical research at the University of Texas in orthopedics, sports medicine, and high impact trauma. I say that because my background as a researcher plays a key part in my sales training. Whenever you hear me talk about something that was discovered by somebody else, you'll hear me cite it.
See, when you said using skills that we didn't get to use, I thought you were going to say you're like some kind of trained assassin or something, but
nope, medical stuff. I was trained as a combat medic.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. That's thankfully you don't have to use it too often nowadays, but it was very, it's important stuff to have, of course. All right, so I'm so curious about the steak thing because I think about I did buy some big speakers off a guy in a white truck once, and they have the whole spiel of, hey, you know what, we had the delivery, this one didn't make it, I don't know what's going on, the inventory, $200. I'm like, yeah, sure, it worked great. So how did you go from $40 in a week or 2 weeks to making it successful, learning from your drug addict cohort there?
So, when you have a child, when you grow up the way that I did, drop out of high school, all that other fun stuff, you don't have the support network that you need to be a very social person. So I was very introverted. I had to kick that habit. So after those first 2 weeks, I stepped out of my comfort zone, right? I started writing with people who were consistently successful. Learning the tricks of the trade, learning how to do a true impulse sale.
Okay. So it was impulse. Like you got to go to people when they're hungry, sell them those steaks, basically, right? I mean,
kind of, there's a lot of congruencies with all different types of sales, but every individual type of sale can be wildly different from the others. An impulse sale versus an enterprise sale are two completely different things, right? Whereas an enterprise or an impulse sale is something that happens on the spot, something that somebody wasn't looking for. You created the spark and you closed it. Whereas an enterprise deal, I mean, you have to convince people that are or have influence over people that aren't even in the room with you.
Yes. I love the fact you changed the word convince to influence. That's a key differentiator in enterprise sales, as you know. That's very good. And you told me before the show started, you've done over 40 million in sales just in the past handful of years. So there's obviously some fresh methodology, things I want to talk about with you about this archetype and getting to know who you're speaking with. So give us a little thumbnail sketch on that, what that looks like. And then, of course, I want to hear a story about it. So,
of course. So if you're working with me, the very first thing that I'm going to help you fix, and this is the piece that nobody else is really addressing. A lot of sales trainers have never even heard of buyer archetypes, but it's who you're actually talking to. This is why a lot of what people have tried in the past hasn't worked long term. every program gives scripts and rebuttals and frameworks, but they assume that every buyer thinks the same. And that's just not pragmatic. It's not reality. So what happens is, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you never really know why. And that's why their sales will feel inconsistent. What makes this different is I show you how to read the person in front of you first, because once you understand how someone makes decisions, you don't need scripts anymore. You actually know what to say naturally. So I'll fix that directly by showing exactly what to say and when, so that you're walking into calls knowing what to do next instead of guessing. Yeah. Within the first 60 seconds, your prospect actually tells you how they think, based upon how they answer their questions, whether it's in future logical, future emotional, or past logical, or past emotional tense, right? Once you can see that, everything else becomes predictable. And that's why this works when a lot of other things haven't, because it's not another tactic. It's literally the lens that everything else sits on. And without that, it's a coin flip.
Okay, cool. Give us a story on how you, tell us, you came up with this, or you learned somewhere and adapted it yourself. What's the origin of it?
So I'm as nerdy as they come. This was a product of my research. So Carl Jung was an amazing person who lived in 1920s Germany. I used a lot of his research, as well as the research with disc profiles and a few others, basically 70 years of behavioral science. And I was able to put this together, but none of this is my own. It's things that I put together from previously existing research.
Totally fine. Okay. Give us an example of that. I know we first talked a while ago. I was very impressed by your style and methods, and I didn't understand the archetype thing. So give us a story about talking with somebody or training somebody and how it went.
Okay. So really, the best way that I can describe this, my favorite way, is to think about the girlfriend or the wife that caught you cheating, right? When she does, and I'm not saying that you should, but if she does catch you, she's going to be very emotional. Everything she does is based off of emotion. She will not do anything logical. Even if they reach out to counseling to get better, right? They're doing it for emotional reasons, not logical. And if you try to talk logic to that person, it will never work, right? Your buyers can be the same way, right? You think about a CFO that's buying tax software for his business. There's no emotional connection to it. There's none. He only wants to talk logic, right? So I get that, people make decisions emotionally and then back it up with logic. It's one of the most repeatedly cited things in behavioral science. But I also think that is about 5 degrees off cool.
For the non-emotional people, it's 5 degrees off center. But for someone who is emotional, it'll be perfect, right? Or
well, that works both ways, because you can have people that only make decisions emotionally when they're buying something. You have people that only make decisions logically, and then you have people in the middle. And those are really the 4 buyer archetypes.
Okay. And so you identify them before you get on a call, the archetype? Or
so you're able to identify them based on how they're answering their questions. So if I ask them, why do you want to improve your sales training? And they give me an answer that is based in forward logical tense, right? I know that they're 1 buyer archetype. If they do it in forward emotional tense, I know that they're another buyer archetype. That one's actually called the jester. If they talk in past emotional, that's another one, or past logical, that's another one. So those are the 4 different buyer archetypes. And while your archetype changes based on what you're buying, it's something that will stay static throughout the duration of that sale.
Okay. When you said past logical, my brain said pathological, but that's just fine. Great. So when you work with people, give me a success story. Somebody you work with who was doing, X and you took them to Y.
Yeah, actually. So in my previous full-time job, I was the top of the board at a multi-billion-dollar software company selling software for clinical research. And one of the ladies that I trained there, she was a clinical researcher with 0 sales experience. So I teach her the basics of sales, and she starts going into her meetings, and she's doing okay, right? She's starting to get the experience, but she's having a hard problem connecting with about 60 to 70% of her clients, right? Well, if you look at the 4 different buyer archetypes, that would mean that she's probably talking to only 1 archetype that she actually connects with, right?
Yeah.
Once I was able to teach her, if they are making decisions in past logical tense, for instance, that is somebody who is a skeptic to their very core. And they will be a skeptic to their very core, even outside of that sale, right? Once you understand these things, it becomes a lot easier to converse with them.
I love that. Okay. Let's, for the audience's sake, let's give them an example, right? So now we talked before, so just start over again. Ask me some questions about my business, and I'd love to see how you can dissect my answers here. you don't
Okay.
mind. Yeah.
So, Doug, why is it important that your business grows?
Well, I have some individual and professional goals to give my staff salary increases, as well as myself. So monetary would be the biggest one.
Can you be a little more specific? Like, what would you do with the money?
Okay, sure. I'd probably increase my retirement portfolio quite a bit. I think I mentioned I want to get back in the air, so I want to get an airplane again. Those are the personally for my employees. I'm not sure what they do with it, but I know they can always use more money. Nobody wants less, so that works for them.
Perfect. So the answer that you gave me was about 90% logical. The one piece that wasn't was I want to fly an airplane, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that piece is emotional. So I would argue that you are dominantly in forward logical tense with a little bit of forward emotional, right? That buyer archetype is called the warrior. That is somebody who is, and if I'm wrong on any of this, just correct me. Okay. I'm happy to be wrong on a podcast. But a warrior is somebody who knows what they want. It's somebody who's going to walk into a conversation. They're going to be the alpha, right? They're going to try to shit test you, even if they're not doing it intentionally. They're going to try and steal the frame. It's somebody who is or can be relatively forceful in their answers. I would argue that you are predominantly that buyer archetype for this conversation. And then that 10% or so that you're answering in forward emotional, that piece comes from the jester. The jester is somebody who likes to get along with everybody. Charisma is part of their very core nature.
Right.
Rapport comes with a conversation. It's not something you have to build with them. And I think you have shades of that as well.
Yeah, everyone's got a little bit of everything, but there's a dominant one there. I studied this with, I read the book, Florence Littauer's book, Personality Plus, and I went through the DISC thing and Strengths Finders, and I got some stuff there, but I understand when you use Jester and Warrior. I like those because you instantly get a visual with that. So it kind of resonates with me. When I did my personality profiling and some of the work that I'm doing, I'm a movie guy. So I only did 4 archetypes, the 4 basic ones. I'm sure there's more than that, but the 4 that I designed was the director of a movie, producer, writer, and actor. So the actor is the flamboyant, outgoing, life of the party, late for meetings, shiny object entrepreneur. The writer is the mediator, he's thoughtful, maybe musical. The producer is the numbers-oriented, logical guy who's got to make sure all the balance sheets work out for the movie. And the director is the, I guess that'd be the warrior one. We're like, hey, it's fire, ready, aim, let's go, let's go, right? So those are the 4 I did was director, producer, writer, and actor. I'm a movie guy, so that's what are you using those 4, or you have expanded archetypes? There's different people that talk about variations and all that.
I actually have a total of 16 buyer archetypes.
Okay,
but what I found is if I can get you to thoroughly understand these 4 archetypes, I just don't need to teach you the other 12.
Okay, right. So you have Jester and Warrior, and what do you call the other 2?
So you have Jester, the Warrior, the Healer, and the Wizard. So the Healer. Yeah. I commonly call them the hippie too. This is somebody who is answering your questions and past emotional tense. Somebody who has had a lot of emotional trauma that is actually driving their decisions, right? This is somebody who has been burned in the past. Think somebody who has bought, in this instance, like sales training from 3 other coaches, and they were all bad. They never really got exactly what they wanted from those. Well, they're going to show up to my conversation with a trust, connection, and reliability issue, right? They're going to know, can I trust you? You're going to take care of me. Am I going to be safe with you? These are people that are really slow to warm up, but very emotional. So they would need a lot of direction towards goal setting and outcomes. And that energy will actually follow through on just about everything that they say. They're very loyal, but they're slower to act, which makes them really, amazing long-term clients if you have the patience for them. And then, the last thing that I would say about it is, again, they're making all of their decisions based on past pain. So if you're talking to this person about the return on investment, if you're talking to this person about the new social status that they'll reach or any of this other stuff, they don't care. They don't care. All they want to know is, are they safe with you?
Yeah, that's limbic brain stuff right there, right? Do you want to kill it, eat it, run away from it, mate with it? That's really fascinating. So,
and I just want to point out again, that same buyer, right, that was just talking to me about sales training. If they show up to buy tickets for Disneyland, or they go to buy a car or a board game or whatever, they could be a completely different buyer archetype because they may not have been burned at car dealerships. They might have been burned at Disneyland.
Interesting. That's why it's good that you're doing this, not by looking at their profile, but looking at how they answer those questions on a call. Because depending on volume and the item, it might change who they are, how they operate, huh?
Yep. You need to know in real time.
Wow. Very good. Okay. I like that. What's in terms of your training people and working with this, what's the hardest thing you've run across in terms of somebody like not getting it or somebody changing their types of answers? What's the biggest challenge you've had?
Across the board, teaching people to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? If I see a situation, a sales situation where, I don't have a lot of experience, I'm going to be very uncomfortable there. I'm going to dive in head first. A lot of people don't do that.
Yeah. The hardest thing for me is when, I like obviously building rapport with somebody, and I'm old school with, Dale Carnegie stuff. And a few times, okay, let's get to it. Right. Okay. So I tried a little mirror match. Okay, get to it, get going. But shifting gears on who you are to adapt to somebody else, in my opinion, you can only do so much of that. You can't become a completely different person, but adaptation, I think, is probably what you're saying, or am I wrong?
About 5 degrees off cool. So, I believed for the first 10, 15 years of my sales career that rapport was everything.
Yeah.
And so the book that I wrote, The Theory of Games, is all about getting charisma, using that within your daily life so that it becomes part of your core being, right? Teaches you how to do those things. What I found when I started doing, remote high ticket sales is you don't pay your friends 10 grand to fix your problems. You just don't. You pay experts.
Right.
And if you're spending time building rapport in a sale like that, you've already lost.
Okay. Good to
Think
know.
about it this way.
Yeah.
Let's say you break your leg, right? You're going to call your friend, pay him 10 grand to do surgery? No, you're going to call a doctor, right? Now, let's say that surgeon is your friend. You probably will call him.
Right.
But when you do, are you going to be asking for special favors? Make things a little bit easier on you, a little bit more comfortable because he's your friend and you have the rapport with him? Well, if that was best for your health, do you think he'd offer it to all the other clients? See what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't pay your friends 10 grand to fix your problems. You pay experts.
Okay. Good to know. What do you do in terms of the discovery phase with people, right? Sometimes you gotta find out what makes them tick in order to see if there's a solution there or not. Any challenges there with different personalities when someone doesn't want to open up to you and you need to know things in order to see if you can help them or not?
Yes, that can be very, very, very difficult. I'm going to use the typical business owner as an example. So I deal with a lot of people who are coaches or own their own business. They'll reach out to me. And one of the first, not the first, but one of the first things that I ask them is, how much do you make every month? Right? The last conversation I had, the guy tells me $200,000 a month.
Okay.
I said, wow, you're making $200,000 a month. That must feel pretty good, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, is that gross or is it net? And he stops for a second. He's like, well, you're right. I spent like $50,000 on ads. I have $20,000 in overhead, right? And when we got down to the bottom of it, he's only making about $75,000 a month.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
My point is, if they say it, it's true.
Right.
If I say it, it's doubted. So if I never went through that exercise of having him explain all of his overhead, all the things you're spending that money on, and then have him state what his actual profits are, he would have believed for the rest of that conversation, really the rest of his life, that he was making $200,000 a month.
Wow. So he paused when you asked him gross or net? He's like, well,
he'd never told anybody how much he made in terms of profit, only in revenue. And it's a very bad habit, but I would argue that the majority of people do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially, you've got forgive me, but people checking how great they are online all day. It's pretty common. And I found it very common in the internet marketing space where everyone's saying how great they are. And they may have a profit margin of, 10 or 15%. So it's
right.
It's a little bit different, right? At the lower levels, at least. Interesting. Okay. What's something that somebody could do with, obviously we're going to talk about your book here in a second. So you have is your book on Amazon one they can go get it, or?
I'll never sell a copy of that book. I give it out for free.
Okay,
you
great.
Just reach out to me. I'll give it to you.
We'll put a link down below here, folks. So is there go ahead, give me your website and we'll put that in the show notes here, Matt. So you have it.
Will do.
What's your website? No, tell me what it is.
Sorry. It's profits as in money dash profit as in like Mohammed.com.
Right. Okay.
Profit.com.
Profit.com. Go there and connect with Matt, and you'll actually get a free copy of your book. That's great.
That's
people
correct.
Like that. Very good. What else I want to ask you, man? Sometimes I've talked to other sales trainers about the 1, 2, 3. Call that point where it's time to make a decision. Like, hey, I've given you information, answer all your questions. Are you going to go or not? Right? What are some of the? Obviously, a lot of people like they get reluctant to pull their credit card out on larger sales, what are some things you've seen or do to help them, that tipping point?
So what I normally do, it's not the same on all of my calls, but
Mhm.
the mass majority is show the cost of inaction. This is something that a lot of salespeople struggle with.
Yeah.
And once you understand what I'm talking about and how to do it effectively, you'll put yourself in the top 5% of salespeople just by that alone.
The question was like, I didn't use the word overcoming objections. It's more like somebody has heard everything you've got to say. They understand that you get them. It's decision time. You had 1 or 2 calls. It's time to like, okay, I've given you everything I've got. Are you ready to get started? They go, oh, I want to think about whatnot.
Yeah.
How do you get them to tip over when they have everything and they're just being reluctant?
So somebody will tell me, this is really expensive and I need to think about it. Right.
Very common.
I'm going to agree with them, but I'm going to make an assumption that's incorrect. Well, in their mind, right? So I'll say, I agree. I think it's wildly expensive.
Yeah.
For the past 2 years, you told me you've been stuck in this situation and you've been $20,000 shy on your income every single month. That's $240,000.
Yeah.
Right? If you could have spent 10 grand back then to fix it, how would you feel now? Right? Showing the cost of inaction, showing that them not moving is what's actually causing them pain, actually costing them money. That's how you create genuine senses of urgency without feeling like you're giving them pressure. You are applying pressure, but it's not coming from you. It's coming from their own decisions.
Right. And there you go, folks. There's the bit of wisdom that can make an extra $250,000 this year. If you listen to someone like Matt, who is able to say the truth or have someone else say the truth and not be offensive about it and get people to go from talk to you later, I'm going to forget about you, to like, okay, let's get going. That's good. All right. Any other good hacks or tricks like that?
I've got a ton.
Give me your top 3. I'm not going to give them all of them because they got to call you to get all of them, but give me 2 more if you can.
So, let's talk about value for a second.
Yeah, sure.
I had somebody ask me the other day, like, let's say that you're working at a company, Matt. They're like, they're giving you a bunch of leads, but they're all crap. They have the ability to get better leads, but they won't invest the money for it. What do you do? Okay. So this is a tricky situation, right? Yeah. In this case, the very first thing that I would do is open a line of communication, talk about it, right? But let's say that they don't fix it. Well, let's use an analogy for a second. If you were selling beer and you were at a convenience store, I don't buy much beer, but I imagine it's like what, $3-4, something like that.
I wouldn't know. I think
if you go to a grocery store,
yeah,
it's be $4 or $5. You go to a bar, $8 to $12.
Right.
You go to the Marriott, $12 to $20. You go to a football game,
yeah,
20 or 30. You go to Cirque du Soleil, it's $50. Right? My point is, if somebody doesn't see your value, if they don't value you, try moving somewhere else. Like if you want to sell beers for $50 a piece, you have to leave the convenience store behind. So if you're not truly valued, go somewhere where you are.
Right. Yeah, that's a millionaire next door attitude. You just gotta. It's always easier to work with people who have the means than trying to squeeze, water from a rock, right, or blood from a turnip, whatever expression you want to use there. Very
and
good.
That would be my next piece. And I feel like Hormozy said it the best, right? It's a lot easier to solve rich people's problems.
Yes,
you can choose whether you're selling to broke people or rich people. You can choose the product. Choose one that solves rich people's problems.
Right. Yeah, that's very good. I love that. Very good, Matt. So much wisdom today. I'd love to have you back again sometime. We talk more about this. I really appreciate your time today, folks. If you're interested in actually making more money, which of course most of you are, I strongly suggest you connect with Matt. He's got a free book for you. He knows what he's talking about, and obviously you can tell by his demeanor here. He's not a pushy guy. He's an influencer to influence you to make more money in sales. And it's not a 4-letter word. It's a 4-letter word, but it's not a bad one. It's a good one. Selling. I always say people like to buy. They don't like to be sold. So help them buy. It's not a bad thing. It's all the platitudes, but Matt, thanks so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. Any parting words of wisdom?
I really appreciate you having me, Doug. It's been an honor. Thank you.
You bet. That's Matt Galpin from the Profits Profit. The show notes are below. If you didn't take notes today, you've got them right here. Just go ahead and download them. Any questions, connect with Matt. He knows what he's talking about. Have a good day. Thanks.